I've got two apologies, Councillor Gilchrist and Councillor Burt. Can I ask for any more apologies? Yep. Have we got a seconder for those? I'll second that. Have we got all those in favour say aye? Have we got any identifications of urgent business? Identification of matters of a minor nature. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Chairperson's report. I don't have that. Barb didn't. Councillor Gilchrist didn't forward that on, so we've got nothing there. So 6.1, confirmation of minutes of the previous Environmental Services Committee meeting. Is there any happy to move? Got a seconder for those minutes. Thank you, Councillor Parker, sorry. And all those in favour say aye. Excellent. So the next we'll move to, we've got Hamish Burrell to come up and talk to us. We're going, hold on, just let me find that. I've got Hamish Burrell coming up to talk to us about the district plan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's really a good news story. I like to think so. After years of this journey that the team have been through and you have been through, we come to that point of notification, which is still just a milestone in terms of getting a new second generation plan sorted. So it's still really very much part of the ongoing journey. It's where it gets formal, and really what I wanted to talk about is what's happening around that. So there's been a lot of work from all of the workshops that have been undertaken that's gone into the actual written text of the document, and at the moment a council report's being drafted up to go to council, I believe on the 9th of August, attached with the district plan itself, the plan that we hope to notify. So as soon as it goes in or into the report, then technically that will be obtainable by the public, and from that moment on, we in some ways we just have to wait and see. So there should be a document really with no surprises. It's the combination of years of work, reference groups, scoping reports, the draft plan of 2020, and of late the future development areas. What is interesting to discuss is, of course, it is the start of formal consultation, and there's a minimum statutory requirements around consultation and who you have to notify. That's very much the minimum level for consultation and engagement. We believe as officers that we probably should be going further in a number of cases, and particularly around, say, some of those future development areas where we could organise for a drop-in session or two. And also we believe for sites of Maori significance, which can have a direct impact on landowners. The consultation plan will be an attachment to the report that will go to council, and any feedback on that's welcome. And then, like I say, it really is the start of what will be a period of time seeking submissions from the public, from organisations, stakeholders and the like on different provisions in the plan. It then goes beyond that to a period around of further submissions, and further submissions are where people submit essentially on people who've already submitted. So you might say, well, I want this, and somebody else says, no, you don't. And that's very much part of the process, which leads on to hearings. We haven't, as an organisation, talked about the format for hearings. The typical sort of format is that it's a mixture of commissioners and councillors. To be a member of that panel, you just need to have undertaken the Making Good Decisions training course, which I believe is a 2 or 3 day training course, which is currently able to be taken online due to circumstances. But look, thoroughly recommend that course. And when it is notified, there is some implications around implementation, and it will depend upon whether the rules have immediate legal effect. And we have been to council on that. So there's 4 areas of which we're looking to have immediate legal effect, as well as some default areas which we have to give rules immediate legal effect. So there's rules around subdivision, there's rules around parking and loading, and there's rules around water supply and sites of Māori significance. From there on in, for consent holders, life is a little bit more complicated because you have to look at both plans at once, and they have different weightings. And that's very much, I guess, the role of planners to judge, or hope to judge, whereabouts the balance should lie, which plan should have more weight, which plan should have less weight. At the start of the process, the proposed plan has much less weight. The goal is, though, to get to decisions by council within a 2-year period from notification. So that involves the submissions round, the further submissions rounds, the preparation of officer reports, and then the hearings and the release of decisions. And from there, it's quite possible that we have to go through some appeal type process through the courts. To complicate the mix, the government's obviously embarked on resource management reform. We don't really know, well, we haven't seen what that's going to exactly look like, but we've heard some very reassuring messages from government ministers and officials that there will be robust transitional provisions in place. And I guess everyone's aware of the intent for a more regionalised approach for planning in the future. So this really is the last chance to get a
Thank you, Hamish, for that detailed report there, verbal report. Has any councillors or your worship got any questions for Hamish?
Thanks to you, Mr. Chair. Look, my only concern, and I can't remember now because it was so long ago that we did go back through the chapter on Maori sites of significance, Maori special purpose zone, and just talking to some farmers recently in and around their concerns, and if they, if it was more around consenting activity and some of those things that they are doing now. I can't remember where we got to it, but effectively their comment was, if we need a consent for pretty much doing everyday activity that we're doing now, then it's likely to be going through the courts. So I can't remember where we got to with that, but I might just ask for that to be sent to me so I can give them some feedback. Actually, yeah.
something that are really thinking about in terms of how we address that and how we communicate those messages. without getting into too much planning jargon and complexity, I mean, what we could say is that it won't change the existing use rights. So people can continue to do what they're already doing. But it will affect potentially, if they are in an area, a site of Maori significance, that's already shown in the draft plan, potentially there will be consenting requirements for new activities. I mean, mainly it's things like earthworks and the extent of earthworks that trigger those sorts of rules. And it's really a chance for iwi to be part of that conversation to make sure that the values that they hold dear are looked after. So yeah, absolutely take the point on, and as part of that consultation plan, we will be looking to do some sort of, what we hope to do, we're thinking of doing some sort of targeted engagement. Did you want to add anything to that, Paul?
No, I think you've covered it there, Hamish. Thank you. Unless anybody's got any further questions on that topic.
Thanks, Chair Kevin. I too am concerned about the significant natural zones for iwi. It would appear that it impinges on property rights of the people who own the property. I'm also concerned that the fact that you have to go through their organisation actually and pay them money to get approval to do anything. We've actually set up a business for them, which I'm quite concerned about. The other thing is that iwi have just stopped Port Tauranga dredging their port because they don't think it's fit and proper. So have we opened up a whole lot of people potentially for conflict in regards to that? But mainly the fact that we've actually aligned their own business to actually earning money from everyone that has to go through that group. So I'm quite concerned about that. And I'm getting feedback from that from farmers.
Oh yeah, I would say to that there's been long-standing sort of organisational arrangements as to how we seek advice in an efficient and expedient way. You're right, there is a entity, AECL, that is a sort of run on a business model. They provide advice both to us and to applicants as well. It's, I guess, a step forward though from possibly where we had it in the past, where in theory we've always needed to take into account some of these values, but often getting that information was nigh on impossible. I mean, who do you speak to? What are the right channels? And that's really where AECL provide added value. Going forward though, yeah, I mean, we have worked through with the terms of reference groups, the stakeholders, different agricultural interests, what the sites of Maori significance should look like. And we've been very upfront. They've been sitting on our website for 2 years. We have consulted on those. So we believe that there should be a reasonable, well, some understanding or awareness of them out there. And like I say, while we have sought to give them immediate legal effect, that's still, there's existing use rights, and it doesn't necessarily result in any drastic change. It allows cultural advisors to, I guess, consider whether there's any, I don't know, wahi tapu or sacred sites that are important that would otherwise be affected or compromised.
Thank you, through you, Chair. It's not an iwi bashing. I'm just trying to point the fact that Samuka is going to become I understand, a town of significance for iwi, and it's just I would like to think that the communication got out to the to the community itself, where there shouldn't be, you know, any fear that it's going to inhibit some, you know, and I understand it's more earthworks and things like that, but I think that communication, you know, needs to be crucial, that it does get to the wider community, that you know, the Runanga is part of what Smuga, who we are, and you know, and I see some positives with that we can maybe, you know, we can work together a little bit better in the future, but as long as the communication to the wider community is going out, that's all I ask for. Thank you.
We do have good relationships with Arawhenua, and I think it would be fair to say from them that they would wish, or what they've communicated to us is their intent to continue working with us and applicants, which they understand this can be an imposition and a change. And just in terms of Temuka, I think it is just large scale earthworks that would be picked up.
I understand that, making sure that is communicated, it's not so it's something like that.
Oh, sorry, just a comment for me to finish. You raised workshops, etc., about being proactive around that future development zone. I think that's a great idea. So yeah, makes really good sense that we pick up on that, I think, and show people what the potential opportunity is and just educate along the way.
Thanks, Chair. It's interesting that we fund ACL to some degree, don't we? We still do that. So we've gone on that journey with them, because I know we had issues in previous years of not getting reports on time and those sorts of things for things that we needed for activities that we were going to do. And at the time it was felt as if we could accommodate some funding towards ACL to better progress the request that we have for activity. But the reality is that there's a real nervousness in the community about, just in general, about, the property rights and known rights of landowners and all types and all shapes and forms. So it's something that whilst it's wonderful to go on the journey holding hands, and that's just great, as long as you're not holding hands to the point where it always hives off in one direction at the end. So true consultation means true conversations between two parties with a will to get a fair outcome. And people with privately owned property have this silly notion that they own it and they have a right to do many things on their own privately owned land. And I'm not sure that that has changed a terrible lot more in time as things have gone on. The reality is, if you own private title of a piece of land, you should have some rights. And you should not be able to upset a neighbour or those sorts of things. But you've got to watch out. What we've got to watch as a community is that we don't get frivolous objections to activity. So they've got to be consistent. They've got to be real things, and they've got to mean something that can be applied in this position here can be applied over here, but not to the point of perhaps frivolous aspirations from either side. Take from either side of the debate. And that's a risk from both sides. It always is. So if there's a will there in the middle of all that to do that, that's fine. But I think that we should, as a council, keep a really tight watching brief on the way we administer the rights for all citizens and our community. So, and these current times, very current, to keep thinking along those lines. Make sure every citizen, every ratepayer has the same opportunity to create activity and have a fair go, and have their rights and wishes respected, but not always adhered to, because that's not the way the real world works. There's always a time when the aspiration that you might have or I might have will not get adhered to, and that's just life. So as long as there's that fairness in the debate, that's fine. But short of that, it could be problematic. So we've got to have that in our back pocket from each and every one of us for the journey forward. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Lyon, you covered off a couple of points that I wanted to raise as well, but also in part of that process, round out costs versus budgets and the consultation process, has there been an increase in the cost going to ACL? And what is that currently looking like moving in now and into the future? Because I certainly was a part of the discussion when we talked about supporting them moving into the establishment of their organisation, recognising that it's going to have a major impact on some of our improvements. I'd also like to know at what cost does that come through? If not now, maybe at a later time.
Yeah, it's a good question, Councillor Wills. As the workload has increased and in terms of what's required for each chapter, their involvement has increased in certain ways.
Correct, yeah.
Their input has been throughout, that it's integral to the whole of the district plan review for every chapter, but obviously for certain chapters more than others. The chapter that's we're talking about today, obviously they've been heavily involved in, and they get paid for their time. Without that expert input, we wouldn't be able to do what we've achieved in putting that district plan together. So they're paid for their time accordingly. I think it's one point of interest where there will be a lot of debate in the community, in the farming community in particular, but also in the wider community. But I think there are a number of others, including SNAs, rural subdivision. So I think this process that we're entering into, if we notify in the next few weeks, is the start of a statutory process, that consultation, where a lot of that stuff can be nutted out in a formal and very fair way through the system. And that's what it's there for, because there will be divergent opinions in the community, and all that gets sorted out over the next year or two. Yeah, so
we are locked in with ACL. We haven't got other options going to other consultants.
well, our Runinga has created AECL for that purpose, and if they choose to go a different way in the future, that may change. But at the moment, that's how our Runinga wants to operate, and with AECL as the interface for providing that cultural advice.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That seems to be quite a sensitive topic, obviously, and it will be into the future as well. So we look forward to all those debates and appeals and all the rest of it. So I just quickly, while we've got Paul up here, if he's just going to give us a quick 2 minutes on the previous EOC weather event and maybe what's happening currently in the weather event currently, just to give us a bit of a roundup while we're all here. Just quickly.
Just very quickly, Mr. Chair, thank you very much. So we had a busy week last week, as you're all aware, and it was a relatively straightforward event, I suppose, in terms of flooding, until Wednesday evening, when we started to see some significant erosion of a stop bank at the end of Mill Road on the Upper River. Interestingly enough, the river was on the way down, and that seems to be when these things happen, is when they're on the way down, not on the way up. But anyway, there was a sort of an imminent threat to the small community that's situated at the end of Mill Road on the river, and at best they were going to become an island, and if the bank went on a very tight parcel of land, and at worst they were going to be the river was going to go right through them. So we asked for voluntary evacuations, and as you know, all but 2 agreed to evacuate. In fact, everybody agreed to evacuate, and then 2 went back in through the cordon that we'd put in place to protect their properties while they were evacuated. And what that did, that triggered a series of events whereby we ended up declaring a state of emergency in order to give effect to a full evacuation, which might otherwise have been avoided had everybody just voluntarily gone. So it did create a bit of work, and it did seem like a big statutory hammer to wield for a very small tack, but that was the only tool available to us in order to give effect to that evacuation and keep everybody safe. So that is what we did. And obviously, whenever you declare a state of emergency, it grabs media attention, and all of a sudden, we got that attention at a national level. So it was an interesting event. We managed to keep everybody safe. Those two that refused to evacuate when they went back in, police went back in to get them out and eventually got them out. And the day after, they came in to see us and we had a chat downstairs, and we showed them the photographs, and they were very much on the team. Then all of a sudden they said, "Oh no, shit, I've never seen it that bad," was the words used, I think. So they were on the team, but on the night when we needed them, they weren't on the team. So there's an interesting discussion point there, I suppose, in terms of the legislation. Is there an interim step that could be developed that could help us in those scenarios, so that we don't have to go to a full-blown state of emergency in order to give effect to evacuation? But that's a conversation for CAG and for NEMA, I suppose, at a higher level. But this week we've got another developing situation. It's different. It's not coming over the main divide from the west. This is an easterly. It's unusual in that it's making some headway inland, and that may be a problem later on. So we're watching the situation very closely. The ERC is up and running as we speak, and planning for this evening, and we'll see how it develops. But at the moment, the rivers seem fairly low, and so we'll play it by ear, and we'll respond accordingly to keep everybody safe.
Thank you, Paul. Very quick question, Steve. Councillor Walls first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, just on a personal level, I just want to acknowledge the EOC group, just to see everyone pulled together, being professional, absolutely taking everything into consideration. It was real. I said things. I know I've spoken to Stu about this. Sorry, to Mr. Cooper before, but certainly was a real acknowledgement and recognition of, just in case of emergency, how well the team works together. But it's also to the other people behind the scenes, you know, completing the business as usual content of what's required at council. So it's a collective, I suppose, team effort, and absolutely excellent work completed. So well done to you and your team. Thanks, Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Councillor Walls. Councillor Paddington.
You just pull the old sledgehammer walnut. Are we putting up a recommendation? Because when you declare a civil defence emergency, everyone goes into panic mode. Whaitira get alerted, businesses, main freight all get alerted, because there's two clowns, they can't get out of one batch. It just seems the police should have powers to remove those people or do something with them rather than declare a civil defence emergency. So I'd like to see that you write or start the ball rolling how ridiculous that is, if you think about it.
Quick answer there. B.
Well, through you, Chief, yeah, look, that point has been raised with the legislative proposed, and we intend at the key meeting, the civil defence coordinating executive group, so the executives to advise the joint committee to use this as a classic illustration of exactly why you should have some sort of authority or power or place to go and remove a couple of people rather than disrupt an entire community and everything else all the same to the people. The alternatives, of course, weren't very palatable because the police couldn't move until we had sanctioned their authority to do so by that state of emergency. So, but we will be using it, and when what's his role at the National Emergency Management Agency?
I think he's the chief executive.
Chief executive, he's here next week.
Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Hamish, for your detailed district plan review, and Paul for that explanation. And there's no considerations of urgent business or minor nature, so I call the meeting closed. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Yep. We've got a seconder for the verbal report. Councillor Lyon, all those in favour? Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, good morning and welcome to Infrastructure Committee. First of all, I would just like to say regarding last week's weather events, a thank you to Paul and Beth, Justin, Grant and all your teams, and Bede and Deputy Mayor Wills. Great coordinated response, great communication was sent through us, and it was greatly appreciated. So well done. Moving on to order of business, I have apologies from Councillor Gilchrist and Councillor Birch. I need to move them. You'll move them. Thank you. Seconded. So Councillor Walls moved and seconded by Councillor Oliver. Thank you. Identifications of urgent business, I've been aware of none, nor of a minor nature.
So just one thing, I think Mr. Hall might update us anyway, just on the current water situation, but also potentially just an update for councillors around process on the microfiltration. I know some sort of planning has been done and we've built the other plants, and maybe just an opportune time for an update on that.
So, so what was the first one? Update on?
So current water situation as far as reservoirs, and then the microfiltration.
And then update on
timeline, if you like.
Yeah, microfiltration.
Thanks.
Lovely. You write that clear? Wonderful. Any conflicts of interest to be declared? No.
A matter of minor nature. Can we have an update on the ECAN report on the manganese?
Manganese. Yep.
If we're talking water.
Yep. Okay, so I'll just so just to clarify, we're going to minor natures will be an update on the current water situation regarding our drinking water, and an update on the microfiltration, and then an update of where the magnesium situation is with Opaheed. Okay. Lovely. Chairperson's report. Over the last month or so, since our last standing committees, I have attended a My Way public transport meeting update, Streets for People proposal workshop, Aorangi Stadium, a trust meeting, a Timaru City Town upgrade, a meeting with Group Manager Andrew Dixon, and attenders and procurement meeting. So I'll move my report if I have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor O'Reilly. Perfect. Wonderful. Okay, so moving on to item 6.1, which is the minutes of our infrastructure committee held on the 14th of June. I'm happy to move those minutes if I've seen them. Thank you, Mayor Bowen. All those in favour? Carried. Lovely. So move on to report 7.1. We only have the one report today, so I will welcome Michelle and Grant up and let them speak to the report first. Thank you.
There we go. Thank you. I'll just touch briefly on the report. I won't go into too much detail in terms of the CDN scheme. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Although I will just point out in terms of the different sorts of connections that we do have on the CDN scheme, because that's sort of the critical issue that we have, where we have stock troughs that are connected to the scheme, we have tanks that are not restricted, and then we have tanks that are restricted. So we have a real mixture within the scheme. There are a number of issue statements that we do have with the scheme, in particular the demand, the access to raw water, the public health, and you will have seen some photos of different connections that are really high risk to the scheme, and of course the aging assets. So we have carried out quite an extensive consultation process, and I'm not sure whether or not you were able to have a look at the website with some of the information on there, but it's very interactive, and it does provide a really good breakdown in terms of the different types of connections and the responses. But overall, from that, we really had a couple of key issues that or key points that came through from the public consultation. And that was that in general, they're pretty happy with the scheme, but there are some key aspects. And so improving the level of service, the water pressure to some parts of the scheme rated highly. A majority of the scheme users believe that it should be a trickle feed system, and a majority of the respondents also had a view that on-farm improvements to the scheme should be funded by the individual property owners. So leading on from that, our proposal is a reconfiguration of the scheme, and basically over time, over an extended period of time, to turn it into a fully trickle-fed tank system, similar to the Downlands and the Te Moana scheme. It provides the opportunity for the property owners to then manage the water within their property, whether or not it's through moving troughs around or whatever it might be. And so we're really, but we want to do it at a rate that takes into account the fact that a lot of the consumers are quite happy with the scheme as it is, and that there are assets on there that still have an effective life. So we don't necessarily want to get rid of everything immediately. We want to do this over a little period of time. So we're talking about an improvement program that does turn it into a trickle feed scheme, and over a period of time to gain those benefits, and to develop the strategy to do that. So we are talking about doing some initial work now in terms of some trunk main realignment and getting those properties onto tanks and trickle fed, and also identifying those areas that are under pressure in terms of us being able to meet the level of service and converting those into trickle fed systems. And then over a period of time through the long-term planning to gradually convert that scheme to a fully trickle-fed system. Part of of that process is consultation with the landowners, because they'll need to be prepared to then reconfigure their on-farm pipe or reticulation, and so they will need some time for that. And part of the discussions that we had with the consumers, there was a bit of interest in having a liaison group. So there's a potential option to do that, to have a closer liaison with the consumers. There's also an appendix at the back, which is the current water allocation procedure. It's as a procedure. We have a very similar documents for the Downlands and the Te Moana, which is related to which is as a policy. This again, the recommendation is that we actually formalise the allocation procedure for the C-Down scheme. That may incorporate then having a single policy for Downlands and Te Moana and C-Down. But yeah, that's, I guess, perhaps a next step. I'm happy to take any.
Thank you, Grant. I've got a couple of questions.
Yes.
So you sent out, so there's 542 rateable properties. So you sent out surveys to all of them. You received 59 responses. That's correct? Plus you had 100 at the drop-in. So about 160 odd people have fed in over rateable properties of over 500.
That's right.
That's right. Okay, just clarifying that from my own thought. Also, regarding public health, so it states it will significantly improve backflow protection. So when we talk about significance, is it an increase of what we've got now to where we're going? You know, how significant is that?
Yeah, you may recall, we did a survey of all of the properties to identify where all the troughs were. So on ground in terms of determining where all the troughs were, and we came across a number of connections that were providing a high risk of backflow to the scheme, and so we've gone through and changed all of those. So we've been in touch with those consumers and indicated, you know, what needs to be done to remove those. But there's an ongoing risk that there are those types of connections that are made, and in order, if by having a fully trickle fed scheme where every property has a tank with a restrictor and there's backflow, then you really minimize that risk of backflow back into the scheme that would then impact on other consumers. It's a key aspect of the requirements under the by the regulator in terms of ensuring the safety of the scheme is to have appropriate backflow.
So that the trickle flow will pretty much make it close to 0% chance of backflow.
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. And the future management of set down water supply for the next 10 to 30 years. So that's a big, it's not 10 to 15 or 10 to 20, that's like a 20-year buffer you've given yourself. So it seemed quite large. So best case scenario, it might last 10 years, worst case 30 years. Is that what you're saying in this report?
Yeah, we're saying that the end date of that is flexible, really, because we want to maximize the asset that we have, and so some of that asset does have that sort of life. However, it may be practically that it has to happen sooner than that, and therefore that 30 years is as a maximum. We think it would. It's probably in a shorter period of time, and I would have thought that the 10 years was probably more likely. But in order to maximize the investment that we currently have, we didn't want to sort of tie it to 10 years. So we did want to provide the flexibility of having a period of time, but I do seriously believe that it will be quicker than 30 years. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Wills.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Mr. Hall, just in regards to the identified backflow ones that are at risk to contaminating our water supply, or their water supply, obviously we've seen what's happened up in North Island. What mitigation factors you put in place at this stage to ensure that we don't get any of those happening immediately and also into the future? Are they being requested or to alter or change their backflow systems or take their water supply out altogether?
So it's not a matter of taking the water supply out altogether. We can't disconnect them. But so we work with them in terms of identifying what it is that they are trying to achieve and what they are doing in terms of risk to the scheme, and getting them to obviously disconnect anything that has the potential to provide backflow, and it's an education program is the key to make them aware of what it is that they're doing in terms of these unauthorized connections that are causing a risk.
So if they've got unauthorized connections, why are we allowing them to still progress? Why can't we just say, look, the water's going to stop here, you're not allowed to further use that water because of the risk back to our community? I know there's an education process, but how long will you go with the education process before you actually decide we can't afford this risk?
It becomes very difficult for us to disconnect, someone from a water supply for public health reasons. So we end up needing to then, in effect, prosecute them in relation to, under our bylaw for doing unauthorised modifications to the scheme. So it's a prosecution process.
But we've never gone down that line, have we?
No, we haven't.
So at what stage do we actually draw the line in the sand? If they've altered, deliberately changed it, then we actually have to take some regulatory authority and take control of it if they're not going to come to the party. Because I don't want to sit here in 5 years' time and see that we've got a backflow contamination from an animal shop,
Yep.
say, for example.
No, I absolutely appreciate what you're saying. And the response that we've had to date has been positive. That has meant that we haven't had to then prosecute anyone. They have taken out what it is that we've required them to do and complied with what we're doing.
That's what I'm looking for. No, that's good.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Hall.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think it's the future. What you're planning is great. You know, the sooner you get it done, get it similar to Downlands, the better it will be. And I just like the idea of your futurising, you know, being able to allow for growth within in that area, getting more water to it. Yeah, because everyone really wants to get closer to Temuka, so that's pretty important. But you know, it's sort of that. You know, I think it is important that we have the whole of our district on a similar schemes and everything, and having one policy for the whole lot makes a lot of sense. So yeah, well done. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Booth.
Yeah, thanks, Grant. Couple of questions around probably allowing for growth. Yeah, we've identified an area out there for expansion and for intensification. So I guess, is that simply a matter of taking consideration and increasing the pipe diameter now and putting it in the ground for future development? And I just also noted in there that we are responsible for the water supply up to the Bullcock at the storage tank. I mean, in town, isn't it actually up to the boundary, and then whatever goes beyond the boundary is your responsibility?
There's a difference between how we operate our urban and our rural schemes. So with rural, our point of supply is up into the Bullcock, and in urban, it's up into the property boundary. So there is a distinction between how those urban and rural supplies are, where that definition is between public and private.
And just to add to Michelle's comment, the pipeline from the boundary can go quite some distance to the tank, and obviously we don't want any connections or any modification to that pipe between the boundary and the Bullcock on the tank, because that provides that whole backflow problem that we have. Therefore, that's part of the rationale for it being ours. You can't touch that as a property owner, and therefore we take responsibility right the way through to the Bullcock on the tank.
Right, so you couldn't have it like, is there like a backflow valve for us that should be standardized? I don't know. Is that sort of thing in the line that's standard, so water can't come back?
So we provide an air gap on the tank,
right,
as the backflow prevention. So that provides a physical barrier in terms of the backflow of having a gap. It's nice and cheap and easy.
Yeah, I'm not involved, but that's all right. Thank you.
Sorry, on the growth, we're currently constrained in terms of our ability to supply more consumers on CDM, whereas with the conversion to the trickle feed, we'll be able to manage that demand and therefore be able to provide additional water for intensification. So additional domestic properties within the area.
Thank you. Mayor Bowen.
Thanks. Just a question on treatment. Is it chlorinated currently?
Sea down is chlorinated, yes,
Oh.
yes.
So there is
There's
some-
UV treatment and chlorination.
So there
on
is
sea down
some
scheme.
protection around,
Yes.
okay. Around black, that would help with backflow anyway, wouldn't it? Chlorination?
Oh, yeah, but some of the
People
amount
backflow.
overwhelms the chlorine residual that you
Yeah,
have.
gotcha.
There's only a small residual and that could easily be overpowered, as it were.
Okay, councillor Oliver.
Just quickly, Grant, you're saying there's 223 on unrestricted tanks. All the unrestricted, there's no direct flows to properties that don't have a tank, so they just have a direct flow into the property? Or is everyone that's on unrestricted, they still have a tank? Because I'm just wondering what it would cost for someone if they had a direct flow into their property, what it would cost to put a tank in and do all those sorts of things.
So some of them have a small header tank, basically. And some of them, for example, that may not have a house, have the connections to the troughs. So the idea is that all of those will go to a new tank, that would be a 30,000 litre tank, and that would be have the jet, have the trickle feed to that. And then from there, it would need to be repumped and replumbed through too. So it isn't I mean, there is a cost to each of the property owners, absolutely.
What would that cost roughly be, do you think? Just, I know you're not a plumber, but you know, a rough idea of seeing consents coming through or whatever. What would that roughly be for some of those people?
I'm going to guess at about $5,000 to $10,000. I mean, redoing some of their pipe work within their property, but then it provides them with the flexibility of then being able to move troughs around and all that sort of stuff. Yeah,
There is benefits, but there could be some costs
yes,
initially
no, definitely
for the consumer.
for each of those
For each
property
consumer.
owners. Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
What's the capacity of drive through the environment with the scheme? What's the cost for some years?
So those that have got tanks, it's just a matter then of restricting those tanks. Yeah, so that's a minor cost. It's a good question. That's because we were talking about 30,000 litre tank for each property. Yeah. So they may need to upgrade their size of their tank. Yes. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
Okay, we're just going to go back to councillor Booth and we'll look at the recommendations.
But just access to raw water, that was my question. Are we you mentioned in there about ECAM saying no, you can't do that, but have we got a backup plan? Because eventually we will need more water, even though we're going to try and mitigate that by metering, or not metering it, but restricting it. Yeah. So what's their plan there?
So we do have a backup plan where we do have another consent that allows us to take up to 100 litres a second for certain schemes, and we currently do use that to allow us to take more water than our current 21 litres a second. So having a trickle feed will mean that we will have a much more efficient use of our current supply. So most of the time we will be able to manage on that current sea down consent. the times that we do exceed that will be covered by our additional consent that we have that we are able to use to.
You can take more if you want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so let's look at recommendations 1, 2, and 3 about the development of a long-term management strategy, the establishment of a liaison group, and development of a document for set down water supply. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Walls. Seconder, Councillor Booth. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so moving on, we are going to go to matters of a minor nature. So we've got 3, and I'll hand that over to Andrew. Yes, Grant, who wants to start? We'll start with the update on the current water situation.
Update, yeah. I can do that. As of 9:30, we have 50% within our storage reservoirs. So we've been progressively increasing from our low of 23. We've been taking our the maximum that we can get from Hariora and Opahi since Sunday morning. So that's been providing us with about 36 megalitres a day. The demand from Sunday has been around about 18 megalitres a day. So we've been getting some good gains in terms of the storage. The turbidity at Hariora and Opahi, is currently at about 0.6 or 0.7 NTU in terms of turbidity. We need it to be less than 1. In actual fact, or our preference is less than 1. In actual fact, at the Hariora intake at 9:30, it had increased to 1.1. But we've got about another 5 hours of water in that pipe before that turbidity starts to get to Claremont. So we're still taking our full amount, but Hariora will come off as a source later today again. The work that we've been able to do in the bed of the Opahi with the bulldozers has pushed the flow of the river to the true right bank, while our intake is on the true left bank. So that has allowed us to push the flow further away from the intake, which means that the turbidity at our intake has been less than 1 NTU since Sunday morning. So we're able to take around about 800 cubic meters per hour from that intake currently. We are taking it from both sides of that intake. So we are taking it from the side which does have the elevated manganese, and from the side next to the river. The manganese has, although being greater than the aesthetic level, it is significantly less than what it was in January when it was at 2.4. It's currently at 0.09. Although it has increased over the last couple of days. So it is at 0.1. So did some really good work over the end of last week and over the weekend to get some good storage. We have been in compliance with our drinking water standards right the way through, and continue to be at the moment. We can only hope that the impact of the weather doesn't take the Hariora out for too long a period, and similarly that the intake at Opahi, that the river doesn't push back onto our intake side, because at the moment we're getting a good quality from the Opahi, a sufficient quality, and that is by itself sufficient to meet our current demand. Happy to take any questions.
The microfiltration.
Microfiltration. So out of interest, I suppose, a comment I'd make is that I'm pleased to say that the Downlands Water Scheme, with a new microfiltration plant at Te Anawai, has not seen one issue over the last 2 weeks. So with raw water storage and a microfiltration plant, that supply has just been humming. Nice and easy. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The for Timaru, we are meeting with the suppliers who have provided the design build plant at Te Anawai and Te Moana this week to discuss with them a potential program and procurement in relation to a microfiltration plant for Timaru. And we are also organising a meeting with our consultants to go through a proof of concept in relation to a design for the Timaru microfiltration plant. And so within so I can't provide any further update really on that, besides the fact that we have a meeting with the suppliers this week and with the consultants, although that's probably next week, in terms of the design, the concept of design, in getting some a review and a report and a recommendation in terms of the design.
Great, thank you, Grant. Mayor Bowen.
Cool, thanks, Grant, for that. And I mean, this is, I think, the reason why we did change, you know, the focus on this plant versus the water metering back at the last LTP. The LTP is, you know, we've seen in the last wee while and previously that, you know, a risk of to the town suppliers actually too much water, which is an interesting issue in today's world. But as far as the timeline, as far as the majority of funds, and I'm sure we're possibly going to require more to be added to those budgets. But as far as build time, we move those dates. When is the actual funding allowed for in our LTP currently for the actual build?
So there's some in terms of investigation this year, and then it commences the following year.
Following year, yeah.
And we do have an indication in terms of the lead time for that microfiltration plant, which is 9 to 12 months.
Yeah, which is the key, which we're working through now for us to meet those timelines. Because I mean, to me, this is we talk about all those vertical infrastructure projects, but this probably is, you know, the key project that we need to, you know, have delivered in that next 3-year period, I think, you know, of council. So thank you for that, Dave.
I think it's fair to say too that when we first prepared this project in the LTP, we were looking at a slightly scaled down version, which was just going to see us through on a sort of needs basis when we have, you know, high periods. But I think now we are looking at a full plant basically to meet our entire demand. So yeah, I guess a heads up, there is likely to be a cost increase on that.
Any other questions for Grant or Andrew? Councillor Booth.
Just the manganese situation and the suspected cause and where we're at as a council with that in regards to the costs of $500,000. And obviously we feel like we know where the source is and who's responsible and what what's the process?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. So we, Andrew and I, Grant, were you at that meeting as well? We had a meeting with some ECAN representatives, including their chief scientist, Tim Davies. And at that meeting, they had completed or nearly completed. I don't think they referred to it as a report, but as a summary of findings. And we did raise with them the perception that they were both investigating a matter. They were investigating a matter which they themselves may have contributed to because of allowing a practice to occur within a drinking water protection zone. And so we suggested that it might be well within their interest before furnishing it to us that they got it peer reviewed, and indicated that we too would be getting it peer reviewed, and that the matter would be discussed at a meeting of the Council or the Infrastructure Committee, and it would almost certainly be an open meeting. But until we see that report, we can't be definitive. But the words, and I would have Grant and Andrew correct me, I may not be able to recall it specifically, but it was to the effect that the most likely source, well, there wasn't really another identifiable source that was as likely, was the silage pits. So they haven't as yet. We would expect that report probably, I think they indicated by the end of this month, once it had been peer reviewed. And we said it would be coming this side of the election, we thought, to a meeting of either council or the infrastructure committee for some consideration in a public forum.
We were going to get the report review, peer reviewed as well.
Yes, we indicated that we would be taking it and getting our own review where we set the terms of reference on it. So we'll be, once we see it, but we want to see what theirs says before, and including what their peer review says before we go and get our assessment of it undertaken.
So I assume that they would have taken test bores back towards the silage pits in question to confirm that actually was getting stronger and stronger. Are we privy to what their investigation was and actually transparent in the results of those?
Yeah, look, I mean, it seemed to me, and I'm reminded of the sort of cross-examination that goes on when in criminal cases and experts get asked, can you absolutely definitively say that it is the fingerprints or the DNA or something like that? And I'm aware that Mr. Cooper here has probably experience. But often what you get in those circumstances is you get, this is by far the most likely cause, or there's no other reasonable explanation or anything like that. And where they were trying to position it, and Grant, Andrew and myself were reasonably non-committal, they were trying to position it, there really wasn't another likely source, but they weren't going to say without any shadow, they weren't going to say conclusively 100%, we know it's that source. They were framing it, there really isn't any other source. And when we have discussed it, because when it first appeared, we did explore, for instance, was it related to what had happened in May, where the Apua Dam had got really, really low. So was there sediment in that had come up in the storm and had worked its way down. But I think most parties would agree that by far the most likely source is the silage. And has there been testing? There has been a lot of testing being undertaken, and the removal of it, and then the subsequent decrease in the manganese concentration and so on. I mean, it all points, doesn't it, to, you would think, quite a strong conclusion that was the source of the manganese in the water.
Yeah, I guess that's where I was coming from with the test bores going back to basically, because we already had test bores that showed the direction of where it was coming from. So I assume that they may have gone back and done some more of that test back between there and there. I mean, ultimately, are we going to perhaps try and hold someone to account in regards to the issues that we had, and the financial impact that?
Well, I mentioned to the mayor that if we were very circumspect about our position, only saying that there would be a number of matters that would be traversed and they would be done so in public, we thought. But we were careful about not disclosing, but we did note that we had incurred some considerable cost in the matter and that the community had put up with a bit as well. But we're holding till we get the report. We will then take it and brief our own peer review on it, but we think that it will be a strengthened piece of work if we can take what they've done and what has been peer reviewed and then get our analysis on it now.
Okay.
Yeah, and they continue to test, my understanding.
Yes. Yep, they're doing tests from those bores, as are we.
Yeah. Okay. It's quite, yeah, and I think there should be a reasonably rich data source of information.
Yeah. Just one last thing. I did ask Andrew around the initial issues with water Monday, 25th of July, around the 43% storage that we did have when we had the rain effect. And I guess in hindsight, was there anything that could have been done to keep our storage levels at a higher level? I mean, obviously, perhaps there was some other issues that meant that we were only sitting at 43% when we actually had the rain effect, which actually which was impacted on our ability and had to, put out the water call.
And yeah, again, I appreciate what you're saying. The volumes of storage do change quite a bit, over any period of time, and we had difficulties with some of the quality of the water. So the river had moved at overheat, and so we weren't able to take our regular take from overheat, and so that had impacted on the storage.
Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I agree with the way forward that CEO's provided us with, but just, it's probably of interest to note, and correct me if I'm wrong, Grant, that whilst there's text boards put below the site, there's also a text board or two put above the site. So it'll be interesting to work in tandem with the text boards above the site with the ones below the site. So I think the caution that we're displaying at this moment is very proper, because there's a wee journey to go in there, I would have thought. So I think there could be some interesting comparisons to be made in the future. So our cautious approach and now is the correct approach. And I wouldn't think we'd want to leap into casting any aspersions in any shape or form with costs, because there's been costs to lots of people. So it's early days. Thank you.
Councillor Lyon. Mayor Bowen.
Sorry, just on that point, do we have that data that Richard's referring to above the silage pit?
So yes, we do have, there were bores, some monitoring bores that went in above and below. We have the information that the regional council have got on their sampling, and we do have some of our own sampling as well.
As long as we're keeping it, that's fine. Yeah.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Andrew. If there's no more further discussion, I'll close infrastructure committee at, what's the time? 10:56. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it's really good of you to fit in your busy cup of tea to come to the meeting, guys and girls. It's really appreciated. It's really appreciated. Thank you. Thank you very much. No, that's great. Okay, look, welcome. We have the two apologies of Councillor Burt and Councillor Gilchrist. I move that they be accepted. Seconded Councillor Parker. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Now, identification of urgent business. Any items of urgent business? No items of urgent business. Any items of minor nature? Okie dokie. Anything on this agenda that you feel conflicted by? Anybody? No, thank you. Chairman's report. I attended various meetings and got on with the jobs that are going on with this building, met with Erica time or two and those sorts of things. So yeah, that's my report. I move that my report be received. Seconded Councillor Riley. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Right, I will move to item 6.1, confirmation of minutes. We have the recommendation on page 6. Somebody prepared to move the recommendation. Move the Mayor, Worship, and seconded Councillor Wills. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Now we go to reports on 7 on 7.1. And well, you I guess can't keep up. Welcome, Philip, and thank you for attending and speaking to your report. So the floor is yours, Philip.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The report is simply to outline where the museum's at the moment. Of course, we give an annual report, which is quite detailed. This is a brief view of how things are tracking at the moment for the museum. Obviously, I've outlined a few points here just to speak to those. The COVID situation for our museum, as with museums around the country, when I talk to colleagues, is an ongoing issue, which has affected some attendances, particularly schools in term 1. That has changed over term 2, and we're seeing things changing again in the term we're now entering, but also with visitor behaviour. Reduced numbers of visitors, but that is increasing. So we've had below target figures for the earlier part of the year, but that is now creeping up. We've had a very successful, busy 2 weeks of the last school holiday period, helped unfortunately by the weather. And for us, the challenge is finding ways to maintain and try out new public programs that don't compromise health and safety, particularly from a COVID point of view. Unfortunately, earlier this year, we had to cancel our now annual retro rock outdoor event held usually in February, simply because of the COVID situation. And we've also canned public talks and had much reduced low impact exhibition openings. But we do hope that as the situation improves, that will change. And we're planning ahead for that. A significant part of our work in item number 4 is listed here. We've actually got 5 development projects which are linked to the development of the new Heritage Hub alongside the redevelopment of the Theatre Royal. We're providing input into the planning and design review process for the building as plans are being developed by South Base and their associates. We're developing planning towards a new operational model, how the museum's going to operate, and looking at also how the theatre will operate alongside that. Of course, the theatre previously had not had any sort of staffing input on an operational basis. Now's the opportunity for us to review that, linked to what the museum will be doing and how the museum will also operate over 2 sites, on Perth Street and on Stafford Street. We're also very much engaged in developing concepts for new long-term exhibitions in the new centre. It's an opportunity to go above and beyond to create something which will, without sounding like we're slipping into hyperbole, put Timaru on the map. So We've been working with a nationally renowned museum exhibition design company called Workshop E to develop plans, and our staff are working with them to look at how our stories of nature and history will be told in this new facility. Allied to that is the need for fundraising. This is not going to be an inexpensive exercise. In the long-term plan, we do have a set amount that would allow us to transfer our current exhibitions to the new space and carry out some improvements. We're now looking at the opportunity to do something much bigger, high impact, international standard that will ensure that we've got something that doesn't just serve the residents of the Timaru district, but adds significantly to the heritage offerings and a draw card for visitors from outside our region and even possibly internationally. And for the final project we're engaged in is considering how we will move forward to refit the Perth Street building to become a heritage collection centre. So again, it's the game of two halves, the collections being preserved and developed on the existing site and then presented through exhibitions and public programs on the new site. Just speaking a little further to item number 5, with what we're doing with Workshop E, that's a sustained design process. And if we start talking figures, an estimate for the completed work for a new high-end and international standard exhibition would be $3 million. We don't have $3 million. We actually have $600,000 in the long-term plan. The South Canterbury Museum Development Trust, I can tell you now, has about another $270,000. We've got basically 18 months to work towards raising the additional funding. And we know that it will be eligible for a number of grants from local and national organisations, and we do have some of those applications in already, and we're working on developing further grants. The Museum Development Trust, which was a charitable trust we established back in the late 1990s to aid museum developments, hence the name, is also working on developing a website and a public launch of the fundraising campaign to bring it to the attention of people who will be able to support us. So although we haven't been required to carry out our fundraising for the building development, here's an opportunity to harness public support and local and national grant making support for building something that's going to go inside the new facility, which will create something that will have a high impact, not just locally, but also nationally, and if we do it right, internationally. And then just carrying on with the report, of course, we're carrying on with business as usual on top of that, which seems like a whole lot more plates to juggle, but we're doing what we can with what we've got. And the highlight for us over the last couple of months was finally, we received word from the Ministry of Education, our bid for a new education contract to deliver programs, not just to local high schools and primary schools, but now also to early education centres, was awarded, and that guarantees that funding to support that work for the next 3.5 years. So it was a very drawn out process. It was down to the wire, and I have to say the Ministry of Education took far longer than they should have to let applicants know, but we got there. So I won't say anything further, but through you, Mr. Chair, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Look, thank you, Philip, for your continued endeavours, and things are coming along rather well, and it's lovely to see these advances being made. So call Councillor Piddington.
Thanks, Philip. Very informative. Hey, are you confident of getting the 2.4 million you're short?
It's 3 million. Please don't make it 0.4 as well. Yes, I am confident, but of course it's going to take a lot of work and some careful planning and a lot of a lot of hard graft by the Museum Development Trust. Apart from myself, all the others are members of the public. They're not, one's a part-time museum staff member, but the others are all community members.
Cool. The second question, and I was going to ask Nicole, but you might be able to answer it. You're developing a model to support the new operational design for the theatre museum. So you're looking at staff for the theatre as well?
Yeah, we're exploring the options at this stage because the opportunity exists to develop a way of operating which encompasses both facilities, which are going to be physically joined, and it's about efficiencies and looking at what a theatre needs to operate as well as what a museum needs to operate, and also what a public facility combined of those two things, which is bigger than both of them, if you will, needs to operate. It's an opportunity to get it right without creating something which is too unwieldy and of course expensive, far too expensive. So to that end, we've carried out a bit of research looking at how theatres, particularly council-run theatres, are operating around the country. There's some interesting models and examples there. There are one or two facilities in the country that have both a combined heritage and theatre aspect. None of them are exactly the same sort of scale or setup as we're developing here, but they do provide some ideas on how we could effectively and efficiently staff the new facility to get it operating and working within the council framework.
Can I humbly suggest you also touch base with the local lighting and sounding people?
Sorry, can you just say it again?
Sounding very good. Can I suggest you also at some stage touch base with the local lighting and sound people that may have some input into that?
Yeah, we certainly will be consulting full stakeholders through that process.
Okay, thank you.
Stu, you finished? You finished, Stu? Thanks. Yeah. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in regards to the, just so I got some clarity around it. With the workshop E, are they part of the process that have set up some of the stuff up at the art gallery in Christchurch? Is that similar sort of concept you're looking at?
They're primarily involved with designing the exhibition content. Examples of their work, for example, in Dunedin, what's now called Toitu, the Otago Settlers Museum, they designed that work. Their most recent work nearby is actually in Rolleston in the new library community centre. They've developed exhibitions in there. The Waitangi Museum. They've been involved in both long-term museum exhibition development, both in New Zealand and overseas, as well as temporary exhibitions, say in Canterbury Museum or Te Papa. They're all former museum employees. I like to think of them as gamekeepers turned poachers. They know the ropes, they know how museums work. And more importantly, they have a network of technology companies that they work through. They also have identified that if, with the 3 million price tag, at least 1 million would be spent locally on local contractors, joiners, electricians, and so forth, the sort of project work they would be envisioning.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. I suppose you put the figure out there for $3 million, and obviously with all the different projects that are going on at the moment, I'm just wondering if we're going to be having different segments of the Heritage Centre competing against one another for some sort of community funding and external funding from, I don't know, Lottery New Zealand and various other ones.
Yeah, certainly while we have no control on everything that's happening around the community, what we are looking at is other major facilities and the timing and endeavouring to insert ourselves in a zone where we're not going to be in direct competition with something similar that's also happening in the community, whether it's a large sporting facility. I'm very conscious of what Egantai is endeavouring to do. So our aim is to identify what we need to apply for and also when we need to do that to maximise not just our chances, but also to ensure we're not cluttering the landscape of the fundraising landscape and causing too many problems for other people.
I think the key thing is going to be those liaisons with different representatives from TDC as well, just making sure that everyone's off the same page.
Yes.
Because we don't want to look like
there have been some discussions internally about that already.
Wonderful. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's all from me, Mr. Chair.
Just following up on that, we are coordinating and looking at an overarching strategy, which Philip has been part of that, and also Hamish now at Agantai. So we're making sure that there's better coordination than has been.
Thank you. Okay, well, that looks like that is the question. So look, thank you for your diligence again, Philip, and may the journey continue positively.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that really brings us to, we had no urgent business and we had no minor nature. Oh, we haven't moved to the report. Stop me. Yes. We haven't moved to accept the report. Thank you, Claire. Rightio. Someone like to move that we receive and note the report. Seconded, Councillor Wills, on the voice. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Gee whiz, thank you for that. So now we had no consideration of urgent business or minor nature. So I guess that calls the meeting to a close, does it? Correctly? Thank you for your attendance. Thank you. It was so, and thank you for finally getting here, Patty. Thanks, Claire. Thank you. Ah, magic. Hey, Jason, there you go.
Don't keep me on the straight and narrow, Jason. Wow. So we'll just be talking amongst ourselves, that's all. So Zura's online. All right. She'll step into the first couple. Yeah. I'll just dodge my way through. Okay, welcome to the to our Commercial Strategy Committee meeting. Apologies, noted as Peter Bird and Barbara Gilchrist. Any identification of any items of urgent business? Oh, okay, the apologies. Someone like to move that? Gavin, seconder, Patty. Urgent business, matters of a minor nature. Declaration of interests, conflicts of interest. Okay, brings us to 6.1, confirmation of minutes. So is there any comments around that? If there's not, moved, seconder, Nigel, Bowen. Okay, and that takes us on to our reports. Item 7, and that's 7.1, financial report for the month ending May 2022. So, and that is going to be presented by Azura, I presume, is it? Azura is online.
Morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Yes, we can.
So the first report, financial report ending 30th May 2022. Very good results overall, carrying on in a very healthy position. We have a surplus of 15.7 mil as at May. This is a 9.9 million favourable variance to budget and 3.8 million to forecast. It is effectively at the moment tracking at 94% of revenue for the year end, and the expenditure is tracking at 90% of forecasted expenditure for year end, which is well on track. The capital expenditure is at 59.2 million as at May, and this is 78% of the full year forecast. In terms of the borrowings, we are at 138.9 as at May. There is a report that will follow around the 30th, year-end position at 30th of June. The debt to revenue ratio again is well within the LTP funding ratios, and that is 122% compared to 210%. Those are the key highlights. In terms of variances, I just wanted to highlight that the personnel cost is still behind in terms of expenditure, and due to the same reasons as previous months, and that is due to being behind on recruitment and, of course, the current state of the personnel workforce at the moment. And in terms of the fair value movements, again, tracking really well. So as at May, that was 2.3 mil in our favour at the moment in terms of the market movements. Happy to take any questions on those.
Okay, councillors, are there any questions from the floor? Just probably one from me. Item 7 there. This is lower than budget by 10.9 million. The total capital expenditure, is that just a timing issue, is it? Or
correct, yes. So as at 30th of June, we're already at about 70 mil. This is very interim numbers as of yesterday. So yeah, majority is timing of capital expenditure.
right. Okay, I see you've got some unders and overs in the following page notes, the financial items. But then you've got them explained. Oh yeah, okay. The waste minimalisation, 1.899 million unfavourable. So what's the story there? Did we not hedge our carbon liability at a certain number?
Sorry, which page are we looking?
I'm looking on page 19 at the explanations for some of the unders and overs. And you've got, there's a large one here at 1.899 million unfavourable, and basically carbon credits is part of that, but also 676,000 contracted costs running over.
Oh yes, so that is there's a bit of work in progress within the waste minimisation team. Andrew might want to speak further to that. However, it is overall, we have obviously earlier in the year purchased more because of the rates going up, and we have since reflected the alignment back into the annual plan that was just adopted. I don't know whether Andrew's in the room and wants to speak further, but there was allocation differences that the team were working through.
The question was around the page 19, around the waste minimalisation, 1.899 million unfavourable. There were two parts to it. This part was the our carbon liability, and also the other part was the 676,000 contracted costs over and above attributable to initial setup costs. New supplier. Perhaps you could just give us some comments around that, Andrew.
Okay, yeah, I'm not totally familiar with the numbers on that, but it could be a phasing issue there. But yeah, there has been some substantial costs in setting up, but they were budgeted for. So it is, as I say, it could be just simply the phasing of the expenditure. But yeah, the carbon credits, that is definitely an unfavourable. It cost us more, and that's due to the significant increase in the price of carbon. Yeah, when we budgeted, we were looking at around $40 a unit, and when the auction came up, we had to pay $75 a unit.
So basically, you've locked in at $75 or $70.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, how do you pass that on to the? How do we recoup that? Are we actually recouping that straight away at the dump? As people, does that automatically move straight up, or do we have to wait for a year and then put it into our annual plan?
It's basically recovered through our fees and charges, and of course we set our fees and charges in June, and we make estimates on what we are likely to pay when it comes to the carbon price on that and set the fees. So yeah, last year we probably underestimated it. This year we have factored in a $70 to $75 cost into the fees and charges. That's why there was a substantial increase in those fees and charges for waste minimisation.
Okay, thanks for that. Let's see, corporate support unfavourable 480,000. What can you share on that?
Oh, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, just on that waste minimisation, the contract costs are up 676 above forecast. Are those contracted costs not? I thought they would have been part of the contract. I don't quite understand why they're above.
That'll be fixed.
Yeah, I would have thought so. Yeah.
Perhaps Andrew. Eric.
Sorry, Andrew, it was the reasoning around the contractor cost up 767 above forecast. Yeah, waste minimisation again. So contractor costs are up 676 above forecast, and it says attributable to initial setup costs of new supplier providing services. But I just would have thought those were fixed or part of the contract. But obviously, there's some flexes there.
Yeah, I guess the collection side is reasonably fixed, but it does increase when you put extra properties on the collection routes. So there's a slight increase there. In regard to the landfill itself, yeah, we have done some improvements as a result of the new contract. And we've had to, well, when they installed the new material sorting facility, for instance, the power supply was insufficient for the new plant, so we've had to upgrade that.
Okay,
Yeah,
so yeah, that's my issue actually. So contractor cost isn't just specific to the contract, isn't it? It might be Rooney's doing some work. It's across the board.
It
gotcha.
relates to a number of contractors.
Yeah, so it's improvements across the board. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Nigel. I guess the only other question was the airport runway costs 190k above forecast. Is that just a matter of timing again, or is that just run over for community support?
Yeah, sorry, I don't have
runway. Just page 19 at the very bottom.
That's capital costs, Andrew.
Capital, right? Okay. Okay, that's probably related to the resurfacing of the runway, which we did have to do the actual side areas, which were originally going to be left as they were, but we had to. The seal on there was not as good as we would like, so we put a chip seal down the side, each of the shoulders there. So that's one, and then the apron itself has cost us a little bit more, particularly around the drainage side of things. So that's on the way. But overall, it should come out on budget. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the councillors? Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, Jason.
So these are the results as at 31 May. Obviously, we are now sort of nearing the end of June. So we're working through the current end of year processes. We're working through the start of the annual report. There's been nothing happen in June to sort of throw these numbers out. So the organisation is still sort of tracking towards these numbers. So it's, even though we're not in a position to release them yet, so I think it's important that council are aware that the numbers are trending as per forecast as at end of May.
Thank you, Jason. So with that, do I need to move that? Okay, I'll move that report as accepted. Got a seconder? Steve? Okay, we'll go on to the next report, which is 7.2, council investments and borrowings. Azura, would you like to give us an update on that, please?
So the council borrowings and investments, again, all within the liquidity and funding limits of council and all compliant for this quarter. The total borrowings as at the 30th of June is at 164.5 mil. You'll notice that this is actually an increase in debt position from the last quarter report. That's mainly due to two loan facilities that we've increased from, and they're both the LGFA loans. One was taken out in April, which was the 20 million. In addition to that, we also had another one which was in June, which was 25 mil. Overall, this is in planning for the annual plan expenditure that we're expecting in the next couple of months. This is all well within the debt forecasted ratio, so that is brought us to 124% as at June, still well lower than the ceiling of 210 in our financial strategy. The total investments are at 32 million because we've obviously taken out the loan in anticipation for the spend and reinvested some of that back in. And open to any questions on that report.
Okay, thank you, Azura. Is there any questions from councillors? Okay, actually, if I may, Azura, if I just go back to the balance sheet financial position on page 21, and just on there in investment on CCOs and other similar, you've got us in at let's see, 24 million. Is that the book value of our CCOs on a council balance sheet?
So, yes, through to you, Mr. Chair, yes, that will be the value, may not be the book value as in the cost price, but it's the value at which we record our investment in Primeport, which is a CCO, because I think the investment in associates is, where do we book our investment in Alpine Energy?
That's what I guess I'm considering the value of Alpine Energy.
Alpine, yes, the Primeport is a subsidiary because we're 50%, but the Alpine Energy is an associate. But that's not the correct number, I don't believe. I think it's near 60 million is what it should be recorded at.
So is that not sort of revalued every 3 years and put in actually what its true value is?
No, I'd have to go back and look at our policy for how we present our investments in associates and CCOs, because we may not record them at a fair value, but rather at the value we receive plus our share of profits each year.
Okay, I guess the reason I'm just pushing that is the fact that it would make a substantial difference to our financial position. The way it's at the moment is well undervalued as far as I can see.
I think those numbers need to be, I don't think they're quite correct in terms of, they look like the actual historical cost rather than the that was applied to them when those investments were acquired. And then when we do our financial reporting at the end of the year, we present them in accordance with the policy, which effectively reflects our share of the profit that has been booked each year subsequent to the acquisition of those investments. So we're not, what you'll see is a difference between Alpine Energy and the port company in the management reports and what is presented in the financial reports. Because this number here, I'm pretty sure is the acquisition number, if you like, way back in a long time ago, 20, 25 years ago, whenever it was, in the financial statements, each year, the profit percentage that is allocated to us and we have booked gets added into our financial reporting number. And in actual fact, that balance sheet, I suspect, will increase very, very substantially when we revalue, not just when we present not just our investments in Alpine Energy and the port, but also in our water assets and our roading assets. Those numbers will go up, Andrew, potentially by 200 million, 100 to 200 million. for the water and roading assets. There's big changes to our balance sheet because this is really just a management report. It's not the financial, it's not the balance sheet we present at the end of the financial year.
Okay, right, Jason. did you-
Yeah, look, it's a very good question, actually, and because in the June 2021 annual report, the value of associates is around $104 million. So what I think is there's a disconnect between the management reporting of the balance sheet and actually what we do as in terms of what Bede has just described. So I think that's something we need to take away and look at in terms of how we actually report the balance sheet through to council. It does change. The annual report is when we do all the, as Bede says, we bring in all the share of the profit and all those sorts of things, but we could probably make a better assessment during the year and make it an actually more accurate number when it comes to the investment in associates.
Yeah, I guess we're going to lose some equity potentially when Three Waters goes through. So we're going to be looking to drum up our balance sheet to make it look as strong as possible to cover, you know, our debt, etc. Councillor.
Yeah, look, mine's just a point of clarification. On the bottom of page 23, our net debt position is the same at 125 million. Is it just coincidence that the debt to revenue ratio is 124%? Because what I really want to know, Bede, is what's the maximum we can borrow in the future to get to our ratio limit of 210%? Because to me, it looks like a pretty simple 210 million and we're done. Would that be roughly correct?
Yes, so every year, because each year we increase our go to the long-term plan and look at our rate of profit.
Yeah.
Yeah. And multiply by 2.1 expense here.
Okay.
So the reason this year is for the operating. So that's why those numbers come to the same.
Okay.
So if that rate's been up this time,
yeah,
on that, that will be last year, we multiply that by 2.1. Yeah. This year, we come here, multiply that 64 by 2.1. Plus the department multiply that by 2.1.
Okay.
There's a chart, so each year, that really is the value of 10.9 last year. And the 4.9 every year, and you get an increase.
Yep.
And that increases your ceiling and your
Just so council are aware, as part of the annual report for 30 June 2022, we're revaluing Three Water assets and roading assets. And this is because the value that we had in the 21 annual report, there's been such a marked move in unit costs and pricing and those sorts of things in the market and the supply chain issues, that the value of those two areas have gone up quite significantly. So our asset base in the 30 June annual report is going to be significantly higher than it is at the moment. In the following year, we're going to be revaluing land and buildings because currently they're at deemed costs. And so those numbers will change actually exponentially. And that will happen in the 30 June 2023 on the report.
Jason, have you got an idea then what our water assets will be worth that we may have to give away?
No, not at the moment. So we're going through that revaluation process at present. So we're getting that peer reviewed. So sort of September, October, we'll have some information around what those numbers will look like.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Andrew, you've got some very sort of broad numbers, isn't it? I mean, a 20-30% movement is not unforeseeable, is it? So, you know, you take 450 million and you add somewhere between 25 and 40%, talking some decent amount of coin.
That's good. We'll be able to sell them to the Crown for a bit more then.
Well, that's our case.
Okay. Okay. Now, I guess just one thing, an outcome of increasing the value of assets, that means that we're going to be required to depreciate and ask for more money from the ratepayer. Is that correct?
Depreciation becomes more of an issue, but council get to have a discussion around, I guess, at what level it's funded.
Okay, so yeah.
Yeah, that It's interesting because, and Andrew is probably, he may wish to come forward on this. When the activity management plans have been prepared, the pricing of what we will need to replace has been based on the estimated cost of the assets that we have to replace. So we've always sort of looked at funding out over the long term with regard to what that cost was going to be. Now, with the move to the fair value, the depreciation should map more closely those costs. That's to fund that depreciation. The question that everybody's asking is this a transitory blip in our valuations? But we won't know for 12 or 18 months.
Okay, thank you. Bede. Okay, with that, if there's no other discussion, I will move that the council investments and borrowings be accepted. Like a seconder, Nigel, Mayor Nigel, all in favour? Aye. Passed. And that moves us on to 7.3. And Jason.
Thank you, Chair. As councillors are aware, CCOs are required to prepare a statement of intent. So this is the statement of intent for the Aorangi Stadium Trust. At the 26th June council meeting, council agreed through legislation that we could extend the timeframes of delivery of this through to council by a month. So that was approved at that point in time. So this is really the report back. The Aorangi Stadium Trust met on the 12th of July and endorsed the attached statement of intent. While council is not required to adopt or approve it, because we're a key stakeholder, it's important that we get a chance to have that councillors have a chance to look at and provide comment. There's no real significant changes. The next report talks to, I guess, the letter of comfort. So we've still got the provision issue in terms of the deferred maintenance and earthquake strengthening that we need to be aware of, and that sort of comes out in the next report. At the moment, the trust receives enough revenue to offset its operating costs, so I think that's important. So this is really the statement of intent for the next financial year.
Yeah, okay. Are there any comments from the floor? I just wonder, are there any changes from the previous statement of intent, perhaps that we perhaps should be aware of?
Through you, Mr. Chair, the most significant change is around the ratio of equity to total assets, and that was planned to be held at about 90%. But of course, since we've got the provisioning, the earthquake strengthening, that's unable to be achieved. So what we've talked about in the SOI is that we seek agreement from the council, that the council will underwrite, and that's through the letter of comfort in the next report, any of the additional costs that in excess of the current funding streams that the Aorangi Stadium Trust already have. So that's probably the main change. The other target that we have in here is that at some point in time, and we flagged it as this SOI, is to review the future costs, the funding, the ownership structure, and the arrangements for the Aorangi Stadium Trust. And I think that probably needs to be a priority in this financial year for the SOI, so that we really do have a good look and a review of how we want this to operate going forward. So those are probably the most significant changes.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, do I need to move a motion?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that the council receives notes.
Councillor Oliver, seconding. Thanks for that, Jason. That takes us on to 7.5, isn't it? 7.4. Yeah, okay. Proposed letter of comfort, 2023. So, yeah.
So this sort of follows on from the previous report. So we've just adopted an SOI for the Aorangi Stadium Trust. Nexia, who were the auditors of the trust, have requested last year that because of the aforementioned problems in terms of we've got enough money to cover the operating, but we don't have enough funding to cover the deferred maintenance and any unplanned earthquake strengthening costs, not that they're approved or we've agreed what we're doing with the building. So the auditors have requested that we provide a letter of comfort from council, and this is just to ensure that from a financial perspective, the trust is seen as a going concern. So I've attached a copy of the letter that Bede, the CEO, sorry, sent to the trust last year. So we're just requesting from the committee that we have a similar letter of comfort in this financial year.
Thank you, Jason. So there, no, you're moving it, Steve? Okay, move Steve, Councillor Wills and Councillor Parker seconding. So example of letters attached. Okay, so that takes us on to 7.5, progress report, Theatre Royal and Heritage Facility Project. And that's going to be Nicole.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Through the chair and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to probably look backwards a little bit to come forwards again, because it's been a little while since we've been here in front of you for some aspects of the Theatre Royal and the Heritage Project, and it is gathering pace now. So our project team, along with South Base and Architectus, have been working through the prelim designs, doing their investigations, and then coming forward. Sorry, is it?
Yeah.
Oh. And then coming forward with the option 3, of which the paper in September of last year asked us to go away and actually develop. So that was looking at the theatre itself and the back of the theatre and the options that were raised by various stakeholders. So that information will come forward, and I've outlined in the paper a timeline that this information will come to you. We're expecting information in August, around about the 8th to the 10th, in regards to high-end costings now for that option, doability, risks, the facts. So we have all the information that we can bring before you for a discussion. What we are going to do, because indications in the market are escalation, you are looking at increased costs. There is absolutely no doubt about that. So as a value engineering exercise, we're coming forward with other options that you could then work your way through as a council and decide where you want to go. So in doing that, we're making sure that factually we bring you the scope. There's a lot of information here, which was the stakeholder scope at the Architectus and along with the project team at the time. And we spent some time here in the chambers. We did a lot of work across the communities, met with various stakeholders. The mayor, along with Councillor Burtonsy, also went and we did a presentation directly to the South Canterbury Drama Group, of which it was very well received. And yes, there were items there that they wanted us to come back with, and that will be all part of that process in September. So we will bring the information to you. At that meeting, then, I leave it on the table for councillors to decide. We've got to have a robust discussion around the option that's there, the doability, the costs that are there, and then we as a project team will take direction from you as to whether you wish to release that into public and then have a community stakeholder process for 2 or 3 weeks and come back in October, or whether you prefer to move forward. So again, that is information we can put on the table for you in September, and you can make some decisions and we will take our direction from you. So other than that, in regards to the group process between information landing with us in August, early August, 8th to the 10th, we have a sort of a peer review reference group, which is made up of people that are not involved in the project. So they're unbiased, there's no conflict of interest, and we have a confidence and confidentiality that they have to sign. So that's been pulled together by Anderson Lloyd for us. We will share all of the documentation in regards to the designs, and that has iwi representation. There will be museum representation, including Workshop E. We have an independent business person looking at the opportunities in regards to the function centres, and then we've got people from the Isaac Theatre and also V-Base, the Otatahi, the town hall. So we've got that theatre representation, again, from independent persons reviewing the doability and to scope. So when we come before you, we will then be ready with all of that information detail for you to discuss and then to be released to all stakeholders in the community here in Timaru. So it's quite a process, quite detailed between now and September when we come to you. We also have a PSG meeting that will happen in that timeline. And we're looking then to, as I said, bring all the facts, the information, the costings to the table, and then we're really looking for that direction from you all.
Thanks, Nicole. Councillor Pennington.
It's interesting perspectives, Nicole. The South Canterbury Drama League are feeling very unloved and out of the process. Who's representing them and their thoughts and through this process? Because obviously we've got Philip Howe from the museum, get lots of input there. Where's the representation from the local theatre group or suppliers from there? Because they're feeling really left out. Two things last week's paper when it said we're shovel ready. I got lots of calls saying, well, which design did you go with? I had to say, well, we haven't picked a design yet. So, I mean, they're feeling totally left out of the process. I won't read you Chris Thomas's text this morning. So I want to know where they fit in. I also want to ensure that one of the designs is actually the removal of the old stage house and everything they requested.
So working backwards, and thank you, Councillor Piddington, the option 3 is the design that small group of people that came forward in the stakeholder were very vocal and then as a council you voted for. So that is option 3 that is coming to the table with all of the costings, and that is the removal of the changing facilities and the stage. But we have to inform you that the Heritage New Zealand are an interested party in the removal of those parts of the building because the building is listed. So they will oppose it. So again, these are the factual information that we'll bring to the table. And we can do that for you. So in regards to the South Canterbury, at this stage, there have been no staff members of the museum involved in what we've done. It's been...
So Philip's not been involved?
Philip has, but he is part of the lead on this table and in the group. We have been going through a review, so there has not been any requirement to this time, but as we've gone through the review of the prelim, to bring any other outside parties in. We've been working with Workshop E. We have, and that's from the design, which is Philip spoke to earlier on today. And the rest has been the construction side of reviewing the prelim. So we've had structural engineers and all sorts of people involved in the actual structure and the architects to bring that back to the table for you. The independent review is like an engineer's review. So the group that have been pulled together are reviewing the scope to the plans. So this is not about leaving the community out of the process. Some of the people that you spoke to have been involved and have been paid as part of this project to do work in that building. So deconstruction and recently to continue to do some work. So we're being very careful. If they were to sign a conflict of interest document, where do we sit? So the reference group are independent. Obviously, we've got the iwi representation. We've got the museum representation with Workshop E, who are a professional body, looking at the Isaac Theatre, which is their technicians that run the actual theatre at the back end, and then also V-Base in regards to their facility asset GM and also their theatre technicians. So they're going to look over the plans at the doability, the design. Are things from their perspective in the right places? Does it look good? Have we responded to the scope? When that is all parcelled and it's completed by the architects, we will bring to the table. And as a group of councillors, you can decide then. And we are happy then to work with all the stakeholders in the wider community to then come back and review, which includes the South Canterbury group. We can make some independent conversations and bookings with them and go and present as we did previously with the original prelim designs. So nobody is being left out. We've just been in a process of review where the public have not been engaged because it's been part of the construction design process. In September the 6th, when we bring everything to you, it is all ready for open stakeholder and public review.
Okay, thank you, Nicole.
I guess, Nicole, you know, you've got the problem being when you read it, a reference group has been formed with specific knowledge to review the floor plans and comment on completed preliminary designs. So we've completed a design. I thought that would be an opportunity to go out to the major user group to have a look and get some feedback.
I think
rather we go through all the steps, because it would be like designing a basketball stadium without having any input from those that use it. I just don't get it, I'm sorry. What I'd like to see is if those plans have been completed, we get representatives of those that use the theatre here, the main user group, and chat to them. We're getting them at the tail end when all the decisions have really been made. Surely their input at the start means at the end they're not going to be disaffected, because that's how they feel.
We have got the experts, you have got a group of experts involved though.
absolutely.
Nicole.
Yes, this is
so-
V-Base, the
so-
technical theatre engineers for the two theatres at the Christchurch Town Hall and also the Eyes of Theatre. And the reason why we're getting them to look in this first instance, it's a check against what South Basin Architectus have brought to the table. It's not ready yet, unfortunately, for that stakeholder review. But when we bring all of that information, which does include there's some big numbers coming to the table, that has to be taken into effect of what you want to do with the design and that option 3 when it comes to the table.
Yep, thank you, thank you. Mayor Bowen.
Thanks. Look, I mean, just a follow up in understanding that we've got, you know, experts in, you know, V-Base, all those that you've listed. I think the issue that we cited really early on was this was going to be a really loud, you know, interest group, no matter how many people they do or don't represent. And I think it's, you know, we did highlight really early on that we have to proactively manage that stakeholder group. And I just wonder if we have, you know, done that well enough. That would be my critique of our process, because no matter what, understanding conflicts, all those sort of things, I just think they're always going to be the squeaky wheel, and the squeaky wheel needs a bit of oil, because they will be the front page as soon as, you know, we go down a path and have to make those hard decisions based on the numbers or not, whatever the decision it ends up being. So yeah, I just think there is an opportunity somewhere in here to at least get them back involved in seeing something.
Yeah. Thank you.
We will do that.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Nicole, with the option 3 and Heritage New Zealand having some interest, how much weight do they actually hold over that? So the way it's listed, can we override? They may be interested, but can we still say, well, yeah, okay, we hear your point, but we're still going to go ahead and do that?
Yes, we can.
Right.
But there is then a process to go through, which is a resource consent. They will more than likely want that to go notified, which means they invite public comment around parts of the theatre being taken out. And there could be a 6 to 7 month time delay, because there is then a planning process that we have to go through. Yes.
Okay, and
but we can
and after we've set worst case scenario, we had to go do that process, can we still say thank you very much, but we're still going to go ahead?
Yeah. And then
okay.
It goes through a plan, a process through a consent.
Right.
And we will be heard by a commissioner.
Yes.
And yeah, we cannot guarantee it.
No. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lyon.
Thank you, Chair. It's interesting, you know, the user involvement is always important. Naturally, it just makes me think of when we went through the process for Seabay. You know, there were many groups that had a really serious interest in the swimming community, and got them engaged in all sorts of ways. But in the end, naturally, each group doesn't get the exact wish that they ask for. So there's a cold reality amongst it all. We certainly should take them on board, everybody on board, and talk it through. But there's always a realization that there may be an outcome that's not totally suitable to that user group. So there'll be an amalgam of ideas will come through, and the idea that's the best will, of course, like cream, rise to the top. So we've just got to get on that journey and include the user group when we can, and then make those decisions as we go through on the best information we've got for a facility that we're looking forward to serving the community for the next 100 years and be run in a professional way. So that's the challenge and journey for us, and I think we will accept that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Lyon. Eric.
Yeah, I'll just re-emphasize the option that is being progressed is the option that council indicate that desire, which involves that feedback by user group. So that is what is being developed. So I think that's really important. Though we haven't had the engagement in this process at the moment, we needed to be South-based and the architects working on design and notes that certain places. But that is what is being progressed. We haven't deeply done that. Yes, we will present you with some options that go within that framework because there are potentially some significant costs and some risks around area aspects, etc. So there will be some decisions that need to be made, which then we can communicate with those interest groups as well. So I just want to make sure that's good.
Yep. Thank you, Eric. I'm just wondering at what point are we able to start establishing a business case?
Business case, sorry, in what regard?
I guess once we get some more information, get to a certain point, then we can actually start establishing staffing, running, and then putting a business case around potential income and what things like that.
So again, that comes back to the earlier paper that Philip put forward. So in regards to the actual facilities management and then the management of the activities and the operations, we've set up, and part of the PSG is to now do an off stream of that group. At this stage, in regards to operations and activities, that doesn't sit within the remit of what I'm doing from the construction perspective. So that then is a decision around SLT to begin to think about how that building is going to operate, how it's going to be staffed, who is going to do what, the facilities management of the building, does it sit within property, does it go forward? So those conversations are currently happening. That information then and the cost. So VBase and others are going to be a really good indicator of actual costs right now in how these new facilities, because there's some very expensive kit, lighting, sound, design that will happen, and that will come in the developed details. So in the next 3 months between now and Christmas, and when we get to the point of build in March.
I guess I'm thinking about how's it going to earn some money.
Yes, yeah.
And putting perhaps a budget around that to see what the liability I guess will be over ongoing for the ratepayer. So
part
that was just
and part of the design, to give you some comfort, is also partly to enable council to derive an income from as much of the square metre available. So there are opportunities in the education space that then talks to the museum.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, no, look, that's fine. Thanks, Nicole.
You're welcome.
So do I need to move that as well? Or?
Hang on, I've just got one more question, Al.
Oh, sorry. Councillor.
So getting back, Nicole, when can I tell the Drama League they will be involved in this process?
So we will have, as I said, some base designs, which will be the draft completions on between the 8th and the 10th of August. They will come to the PSG. I have talked about a possibility of a workshop with councillors that before we could actually bring it on the 6th. What I can do, with everybody's permission, I'll make a time to go and visit and present to the Drama League and go through all of the designs. But bearing in mind at that time, they've not been made public to anybody else. So do I bring them to you all first and then go through some of those? You know, again, it's otherwise we've got a large group of people would have to actually remain confidential to that information before we can bring it and then go to public. So
particular group getting privy information prior to coming to council and some other decision-making process going through. As we well know, that sort of information won't take long to get leaked to the Timber Herald. So we've got some valuable information that's got to come back here for some thought process and some discussion before it goes out to one select group. I don't know what other councillors think.
I think we have to have confidence in the fact that we've got experts in the background actually critiquing our plans at this point. So you can only assume that the competent people are doing the right thing for the right reasons.
Yeah. And there is absolutely no, we have not ignored the drama group at all. We just need to get all the plans, which are exactly option 3 that they requested through you all, to a fit state, but some ideas of costs for you. And if I bring them on the 6th and you want to open them, they will be the first group that we will go to and have some stakeholder engagements, which then gives you an opportunity for any change, any feedback, any information, and then come back on the 4th of October if you prefer. So I leave that open to a discussion.
One point is like there's a significant risk as well going earlier, because I think the council will probably need to make some decisions regarding trade-offs. Potentially with the cost, we know there's a lot of significant escalation going on out there in the market at the moment. So you do not need to raise expectations unduly.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Me.
Or we go back and reconsult and ask the public and let them decide, just like this Christchurch Stadium. Sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, I tend to agree with your point around professionals in the background. I think we just keep to the timeline. It would be my view. It would be dangerous at this point because it is, unfortunately, yeah, they're just not going to keep it. Confidential.
I just want to
Yeah.
So 6th of September.
Yeah.
If in that meeting you choose to bring the designs out into public, 6th of September, we can go, they can be the first people that evening.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, one point. I just think, Nicole, rather than elected members, are you able to follow up with that group?
Yes.
Those
I will
interested
do
parties
that.
and just say,
Yeah.
this is where we're at as far as the timeline. And then just keep it away from us. That's my thoughts.
Sorry, just not would you be doing it because I'm taking it back to the start.
So I can contact them today because this is all in public today. So I can absolutely share all of that information and timelines with them. Yeah, we are very, very close, and I understand people are, but we needed to begin to get some public information out, but we're very, very close.
Okay, so, perhaps we can move on from that now. Perhaps we'll move on to 7.6 and okay, I'll move over for that report, Mike, Steve, and we'll go to 7.6 and a brief progress report
Very
on
brief.
the
If I may, I'll bring Philippa to talk to this.
On the bleachers.
She's leading the project.
As you'll see from the photos, it's really exciting to see the progress that's being made down there. The weather's not being on our side. The backfilling behind the main structure will be finished hopefully this week if it stops raining. And then we're going to start on that last third section. So they hope, all going well, we'll start at the end of the week, beginning of next week. So really exciting at the moment. We're still on time. We're still on budget. So, fingers crossed we get some good weather and we're open before Christmas.
excellent.
Just like to add that we have been talking to iwi and looking for the end of the first week, part of the second week of December, which will be the official opening. So we will make sure that we bring that to the table.
Right. Okay. Thank you. No comments.
Just quickly segueing from the stadium to the waterfall at Caroline Bay, I've been getting a bit of flack. What was the cost of replacing it? Does anyone know? Because we said it was too expensive to replace.
We don't, I don't have a costing on me at the moment, but it's certainly something we're going to be looking at a bit more detail. I think, a little bit premature in saying that we're going to remove it as such. It's certainly, but we'll look at other options. One of the major issues is not actually cost, it's just around the safety and maintaining the water quality. So that's the main driver. Yeah,
Yeah, sorry, just to be, so we're, what, yeah, what exactly are we doing? So we're doing nothing until we reconsider the options, would that be fair?
Yeah, we're going to investigate further options, given the feedback that we've got.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Constructive feedback. Taking into account that I only have memories of stubbing my toe on the thing, so not all the memories are good memories. But yeah, it is interesting. And the issue that I see is, you know, that environmental design, you know, and sight lines and things like that, you know, that's one of the things we have to take into account nowadays, isn't it? As far as, you know, you know, with the playground, I know, you know, you don't want areas where kids or teenagers can hide behind and aren't visual from, you know, that's where crime gets committed at the end of the day. So not to say that the waterfall has been I
think the other thing we need to take into account, of course, is the new playground.
Yeah,
and how that is going to impact on the use of the playground.
Yeah.
But we keep the theatre because it's old and people like it, yet we're going to try and get rid of this for exactly the opposite reasons. Doesn't make sense.
Okay, right, with that, I think we'll call it the meeting closed. And we need to, set mover and a second for that report. Patty, Richard.
I'll move it, but I just want to congratulate you on it's going, it's great. Good to see that progress going on, so
okay, consideration of urgent business. Councillor Lyon. Consideration of urgent business items and consideration of minor nature matters. All those. Okay, I'll declare the meeting